Here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church, we do allow for questions following the sermon. Who has a question? Yeah.
I was like thinking, like with the scorpions and like that kind of stuff. Was that in a sense was that like torture, or was that is that different than torment? Like I always thought that like God never like tortured anyone because that's like for evil. Mm-hmm. But that kind of almost comes across to me as God's way of torture.
There's no question about that. It was torturous. They were receiving what they themselves had, and that's part of what sorcery does. Sorcery, you don't kill somebody, you make them sick. You destroy them over time. That's a lot better, right? Yes.
In the beginning, you talked about the politicians who are socialists.
Yes.
Are they actually socialists, or are they want everyone else to be socialist? They know that it really wouldn't work. Like,
it's. I would argue that socialism is wealth creation for me, wealth destruction for everybody else. It was said that Stalin, when he was alive, was the richest man in all the world because he owned all of Russia. Socialism is money for me at the expense of you. The market is a decision that benefits both of us. Socialism is a decision that benefits me and hurts you. And it's just purely destructive. It's destructive no matter where it goes. And like I said, I'm still working out this whole thing in the future. But when people go into business, it's all future oriented. Most people go into business, they're not making any money at first. It's all future. It's not right now. This is the big problem that the Africans have. They can't think of the future. So going into business, when I was in South Africa last year, I talked to a man who was trying to turn his business over to the locals. And he said he was frustrated. He said I tried it for 3 years and I can't do it. I'm going to stop trying. He said, I want these people to learn what it's like to run a business. He said, but he said, I tried to show them they had to stay later. They had to work longer. You know, that's what you have to do when you have your own business, and you're not going to get paid for it. He said they want to get paid overtime. He said they wouldn't do it otherwise. He said I just couldn't teach them. Well, I don't think that that's a problem with business as much as a problem with the future. This is the conclusion I'm slowly coming to. If you don't believe in the future, you can't make any sense out of business. Maybe some of you can help me with this. This is something I'm working through. There's enough brain power in this room to help me work through this, I think. It's something I've come up against sort of recently. This idea of no future just ruins everything. And it's ruined the church, as far as I'm concerned. Made us ineffective. Yes?
The historical account for what might have happened during this period in history, those 5 months?
There is. To find out more about that, the best I can say is to go to Phil Kaiser's sermons on it. Super easy to find. Biblical Blueprint, just biblicalblueprints.org. His main page, you'll be able to see the Revelation Project, and then you'll be able to go down and see the text of his sermons and also the audio of his sermons as well. And he's got it worked out down to the dates. And it's the most thorough rendering of this book by far that I've ever seen. He's really very short on conjecture and very long on this happened this date. This 5 months would have started on this date because this particular emperor died. It would have taken this amount of time to get the message, 16 days to Nero. Nero was the one that dispatched Vespasian and Titus to march toward Jerusalem to destroy the Jews. That took 5 months. And during that 5 months, they weren't interested in killing Jews. They were interested in destroying their means of survival, which they did and made them miserable, which they were, of course, which is why they went to Jerusalem. That's what he's worked out. It's a very thorough rendering of it, and to me, very convincing from Pastor Phil Kaiser. I would recommend you, if you have time, you're taking a long trip, Get on sermon audio, crank it up. I think you'll be blessed by it. Yes.
Joel passage holds out some hope of God relenting from the judgment, although we know he didn't with Babylon, and yet there's no holding out of that hope here in Revelation.
Yeah, and I think this is why we have to be important for the timing again, because I believe that those who believed were already out of the way of the judgment. Those who disbelieved were all that was pretty much left. And to me, it's a little bit like Peter's sermon in Acts 2 and Stephen's sermon in Acts 7. A little bit like this. Poor Stephen, he had the ones who didn't believe Peter, so they killed him. And you read the two sermons; they're somewhat similar. They sound similar in some ways. But the people that were left were the ones that didn't believe Peter, so they did the right thing. Kill Stephen. That should fix it. Yes?
So are you saying that demons never will kill people?
No. Next week we'll see they do kill people. They didn't kill people in this passage. They were stopped from killing them in this passage. Next week they're not stopped from doing that anymore. I mean, you could argue from the Old Testament, did demons kill Job's 10 children, for example? Did they? I think they did, right? Certainly supernatural happening. Their houses fall on them and they all die. That's supernatural stuff going on right there. Next week you'll see they do kill people. They were just restrained this week. Next week they won't be restrained. Yeah, Shaq.
How much do you think in Africa the problem is in the government rather than the people themselves? Like even in the United States, a good businessman, whenever he sees all the regulations, all this, it's like it has become, more of a hassle to start your own business. I'd rather just go work for something, which creates maybe laziness, creates, and if it is the government, when is it the responsibility of the people to take action, Christians to take action in Africa rather than just, sometimes you could preach all day, but at some point you have to take action like, the Puritans did or whatever. They didn't just sit there.
Yeah. They acted. They acted eventually, didn't they? Having been there for a short amount of time, but having been a student of Africa for most of my life, I think I can address that perhaps a little bit at least. There are those who have studied Africa, and I can think of one man, for example, right now, who's spent a lot of time in Africa, spent time in the Zulu nation, for example. He talks about having, taking them to the clinic after a drunken orgy with machetes in their heads, and getting them all stitched up, and then the next week they're back at it again. And the Congo. It seems to be universally accepted that the Congo is at one time the richest nation on the earth, by far, in terms of its natural resources. I mean, gold and silver mines. What else do you need? Water. But it's a very thirsty country. Richest nation on earth in terms of natural resources. Poorest nation on earth in terms of income. And talking to people there who know, when I was there, said, you know what, you can't start a business in Africa or in the Congo. You're paying off so many bureaucrats. To get around to your question, did anybody see Peter Schiff when he put a YouTube video on? Anybody see this during the Occupy Wall Street thing? Anybody see that? Peter Schiff went up to Occupy Wall Street people and tried to talk some sense into their heads. Who saw that? Let me see your hands again. Yeah, I am the 1%. Did you feel like intense frustration as he tried to explain to these people, they're talking about jobs, and he's like, I hire 120 people. Well, you still stink because you're 1% guy. Remember that? I mean, it's like so frustrating. And I tell you what, I thought about that when I was studying this. I mean, it's almost, when you're trying to talk to people and use reason, they don't get it. Is there demon activity going on here? I don't know. I truly don't know. But like we were talking about, it seems like when people get to a certain point, you can't talk any sense into their heads. And honestly, it is so hard. I talked last week about the whole taxi thing, going around with an empty tank all the time. You would think that'd be the easiest thing to convince somebody, right? Fill up your tank with petrol. You'll be able to give more people rides and make more money. Now, how long did that take me to explain that to you? They just kind of stare at you. I don't know. I'm beginning to think that this is a spiritual battle almost entirely, Shaq. A spiritual thing, a spiritual blindness that's on these folks. I really, it's the best explanation that I have. I believe it's a spiritual blindness on them, a spiritual blindness on their quote-unquote leaders, if you will, who only exist to drain them of their goods. And that's what they do in Africa. That's what you do. You get power, and you squeeze the money out of everybody else. Even among those who profess to be Christians, their whole mentality, Shaq, is this. You have money, I don't. There's only one way. I'm not gonna get wealth by serving my neighbor, by starting a business. They don't even think that way. The only way I can get anything is to have my hand out when these Westerners come. That's it. Even among the believers. And that's one of the things we fought when we went there. Some of the other guys who've been there longer than I were a lot more direct about it than I could be. But we went away asking ourselves, why can't the Zambians, why can't they start businesses? Is it a spiritual thing? I don't know. But I'm beginning to think more and more that it is. You have whole people with nothing to do. But they can't. But every business there that's any good at all, foreign owned. All of them. You go down. We did that. There's Pick and Pay. That's South African owned. Here's a coffee shop. That was a girl that moved from California. She's an American. Here's this other businesses owned by the Chinese. Why? I'm beginning to think. Spiritual. Yes?
Is it spiritual, or is it simply that God has not revealed, I guess that would be spiritual, God has not revealed himself to them? Like, I think sometimes we give, you hear things like, oh, Satan made me do this, Satan made me do that. Satan's
get a lot of credit.
Satan's getting way too much credit nowadays, and I don't think that you think that it's all these demons. Like, to counteract what you're saying is having a hard time formulating what I'm trying to say, because the beginning of wisdom is the knowledge of the Lord, right? So is it simply that they do not have the knowledge? They are not wise, they have not used the resources that God has given him, the revelation of Jesus Christ and everything that he has put into and shown us, rather than demons. Like, I'm doing a terrible job of formulating what I'm trying to say. Are you picking me up?
Yeah, I think so.
You picking up what I'm putting up?
Yeah. And I don't know how to answer that really. One of the things that's made me think about this a little bit is it seems like the gospel has not penetrated. The gospel has been in Africa for a long time, but it doesn't seem to have penetrated their lifestyle very much. Why? Yeah.
It's on a mass exodus in the United States, and it's been here for 300 years.
Yeah.
So how is it any different? I just keep going back. How is it any different than our inner cities, than our towns, and our countries, and our counties here in the United States? I just don't see the difference.
As far as I'm concerned, I don't see the difference. Meaning this, we have third, fourth generation welfare recipients in our inner cities. We've been able to shield ourselves from them, basically. we're pretty much building a wall around our inner cities. You guys, we'll just keep on, we'll just keep on giving you money, keep on doing drugs and killing each other, and stay away from us. Don't kill us, kill each other. Pretty much. I mean, honestly, is that not true? I mean, come on. When we hear about a body, when we hear about a body being found, what's our first question? Where was it? The inner city? Yeah, they do that stuff to each other. Honestly, that's how we think. And so, to your point, yeah, I think that those folks in the inner city are really no different from what we saw there. Here's one of the things that I think about this. Paul saying to Titus, the Cretans are, what's the word? Evil bellies, evil beasts, slow bellies, lazy gluttons. Right? Something like that? Well, we're not there as a whole group yet. We're working at it. But what we would say today, I think, is therefore don't go there. Don't even try with those people. They're beyond redemption. But Paul's solution is, he says, the next verse is in Titus 1, is, this testimony is true, therefore rebuke them sharply that they may be sound in the faith. And I would argue that part of our missionary problem is that's the last thing we do. The first thing we want to do is we want to understand, and I believe when we go into the inner cities, that's also the last thing we do. When we try to minister in the inner cities, the first thing we want to do is placate and sympathize and say, oh, it's too bad, instead of rebuking them sharply that they may be sound in the faith. I would argue that rebuking them sharply is the last thing that happens in modern American missions. Was your neighbor an evil belly, low, slow, whatever, glutton? Well, see, I think the Cretans were kind of a special group there. They weren't all like that, but the Cretans were. And as Charles is famous for saying, the Africans are too. And the unbelieving African is not the same as your unbelieving neighbor. Your unbelieving neighbor shows up on time, he works. He's not the same. And so the response is going to be a little bit different, I believe. Good questions here. We're getting to the way things really are and how to fix it or how to address it. Yes, Jen.
At what point do we realize that not everybody's meant to be a Christian and not everybody's meant to run that race?
Right.
I mean, it's not meant to penetrate everybody. Does that mean that we do what you say, just let some people have their own?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is at no point. And here's why I say that. When Kerry first goes to India, the things that he saw, one of the first things he saw was twins that had been eaten alive by white ants. Because you know why that is, right? When somebody has twins, we all know that women can only have one baby. So if you have two babies, one of them's an evil spirit, right? So what do? You don't know which one. You kill them both. That's what they did. He observed sacrifices. Women throw the Ganges River, crocodiles throwing their babies, their newborn babies, into the river. This is what he observed, and the crocodiles were ready and waiting. And there were people that said these people are just too far gone. Don't even mess with these people. They're just awful. Carey said no. He believed. He was very post-millennial. William Carey was. He said no. The glory of the Lord is going to fill the earth like the waters cover the sea, and India will one day turn to Christ. So I'm going to work. And I think that's the only option we really have. This continent of Africa, for 300 years, it hasn't looked like much at all. But one day Africa will turn to Christ. And I think that's all that's it. We really don't have another option here. Yes?
I think it's important to make the distinction between, people, not everyone is elect, but we don't know that. We don't know who is and who isn't. And so we have to, everybody's called to follow Christ. Right? Everybody is expected to follow Christ. We can't expect that everyone will because we don't see that. We don't have evidence of that at this point. But we aren't in a position to to claim to know who the elect are and are not.
Right. In Kerry's case, it was 6 years till he had a convert. And he realized his calling was not necessarily that India was going to be converted to Christ by the time he was dead, but his calling was to be faithful to Christ, which is all of our callings. I know I talk about the Old Testament prophets a lot, talk about Joel this morning. Their calling was to be faithful. If there was ever a loser group of people that didn't get the job done, I would say it was the Old Testament prophets. I mean, every time they had the message, got them killed. And no one believed them, no one listened to them, or hardly anyone. Few people did. In the case of Jeremiah, it looks like his only converts were non-Israelites. And just a couple of people, frankly. But his calling was to be faithful, and that's ours.
Add to that, I mean, it's either a call to repentance or a call to condemnation. I mean, that's what we are called to do.
That's it, and it's really the same call.
It is the same call, but
Two sides of the same
one
coin.
person it is salvation, to the
Yeah.
other person it is condemnation.
Yeah, it says that in Corinthians. You know, to one, it's a life-giving savor. For the other, it's a savor of death. Yes, comment.
It's a minor point about what Dave was talking about earlier, but one of the things theologians have talked about for a long time is what they call the noetic effect of sin, which is that the more sin gets a hold on somebody, basically the dumber they get, because God is the ultimate example of proper thinking, and the image of God on us makes us think properly. As sin gets more hold, stop thinking properly.
Absolutely. I didn't get into it this morning. I want to get into it before we're finished with Revelation, but I want to get into the demonic hatred of the environment. We saw that this morning. They couldn't attack the environment. They couldn't attack but they will be able to do that later on. And in the demonic hatred of people, they also hate God's ways. They hate the idea of a productive earth. Now, why would you hate that idea? I mean, you have to eat, right? But this is how bad we get away from God. We cannot think straight. And I think an example is the women's groups. They complain about how bad things are, but they can't seem to figure out that Islam is like a horrific idea for any woman, right? But we're all about women's rights. Can't put it together. Yes.
Okay, I was thinking in terms of, that it seems to be a very culturally ingrained ideology or practice for them, like you were saying, the Africans, to not have like a vision for the future. Just as when you look into like Germany, the Germans, they have. Well, what do we first think about when we see the Germans? They're very methodical, very disciplined, and very big idea on the future. So I'm just trying to think about like the emphasis on the Africans being more godless because of their behavior, while Germans, their God is the confident man. That's what there was a 93-year-old grandfather that I would meet regularly. He's very industrious man, and he would say that the God of my hand. My God is the God of my hand. That was his God. Are they any closer to, like, why the emphasis on them being godless?
Well, I would argue that we're in worse shape than they are, because we have had the Christian heritage, which Germany certainly has had. The Africans have not really had that Christian heritage. They're trying to come out of it. So I would argue we're worse. We still have the heritage, And we still understand your next door neighbor who doesn't believe in God still understands that you have to work to make a living, you have to show up on time. That's a Christian heritage idea. You don't get that from any other source, because that's all about serving your neighbor, which is a strictly Christian thing. And so the Germans still have it. How much longer are they going to have it? How much longer are we going to have it as our inner city problem gets worse and worse and worse, and our millennial generation is embracing statist socialism? How much longer are we going to have it? We still do. And the German guy has it, but he's got the wrong emphasis. I think this is, we saw that under Ahab, for example, in the Old Testament. Ahab was a very effective king in terms of national wealth, in terms of national prominence. But he was doing that on the back of his previous godly heritage that was handed to him. He did all he could to destroy it. And he was pretty effective at it. But in the meantime, it worked for him. Kind of like it works for your 93-year-old friend. It does work. Well, thank you very much for your kind attention here this morning.